Lefty Lockdowns and Go Woke or Go Broke. You won't believe this, Go Woke or Go Broke. This is Mark Fisher with Mark and the Millennials. And the millennial joining me today is, of course, Christopher Hopkins on the other side of the camera, our assistant producer. And today we have a special guest, and that is Herb McMillan. Herb McMillan is not only a graduate of the United States Naval Academy, I'm gonna give your whole resume, Herb, but in addition to that, he also is a captain. He is a pilot in a major commercial airline. We won't tell you who, but he is. He's a captain, been flying for them for many years, and also a former elected official from the state of Maryland in the State House. And so we're talking about Lefty Lockdowns, and first up, we're just gonna talk about why are the lockdowns and how have they worked over the COVID period since the beginning of 2020, and what lockdowns make sense, what lockdowns don't, do they make sense at all, and also business lockdowns versus church lockdowns versus school lockdowns versus just the government itself, lockdowns in the government. So first up, we're going to talk about the fact that Herb, and welcome first of all.
Thank you.
So Herb McMillan, as I said, is a commercial airline pilot. He's actually a captain. And captain is the guy who's in charge of the plane, right? I mean, it's kind of like that. You tell me, because I'm assuming, is that the correct title?
Yeah, sure.
He runs the show when a plane is...
It's good to be the captain.
It's good. The guy in charge, right? So you have been flying planes commercially with passengers. We're talking about passenger planes all year long, all through COVID. And have you gotten COVID this year?
No, and in fact, less than... it's like 0.2% of all the pilots at American Airlines have actually had COVID at all.
Only 2%?
Less than 0.2%.
And of course, have they pointed to how that came about? Like, was it from the plane or was it from, it could very well have been from anywhere at this particular point in time. It's a very small percentage.
Right. Well, honestly, they didn't say. They just mentioned it to us in passing. But, you know, I think that, and we talked about this a little bit beforehand, I don't think that most people are aware, they've maybe been wondering how they can fly on an airplane safely, but...
That's the question.
On our airplanes, we have these things called Hepa filters. And specifically, I fly the 737, but they're on the other Boeing airplanes and Airbus airplanes that we have. And these filters are capable, according to the CDC, according to WHO, of... basically filtering particles as small as virus. It can definitely filter COVID. It can definitely filter the flu. So when we always start these fans on the ground.
Okay.
And so from the time you get on the airplane until the time the last passenger leaves, these fans are running, even when we're on the ground, filtering the air and providing a safer environment.
Is it recirculated air that it's filtering?
The air it's not recirculated air. It's air that comes from outside the aircraft.
Is that including when you're flying?
That includes when we're flying.
See, that's what I didn't know. Because I have, and I think we all can say this, we all have very good friends who say, I'm not flying until this pandemic is over. And I've flown, by the way, during the pandemic, in part because I had to for work. But I have to tell you, I put on a really high-end N95 type mask because obviously it was required, but I also would have done it anyway out of common sense. But and this is what makes me, and it made me wonder, I'm like, okay, so I'm in this plane, I'm somewhat socially distanced because this was months ago when they actually kept you separate from people. You had like one person per row. That apparently has changed. And I kept thinking to myself, gee, I wonder if the air is recirculated, and if so, how, if you're in this closed environment, right, then how is it that it's safe to fly versus being in a restaurant where you are in a closed environment, or in a gym where you are in a closed environment, or in a school where you are in a closed environment. And yet we've been flying planes all year, and it seems like the answer to my question is that people, A, had to wear masks indoors because you're inside of a plane, and secondly, because of Hepa filters.
Well, keep this in mind, too. A couple other points. First of all, the pilots, when we're behind the door, we don't wear masks. Almost none of us do.
Okay.
Because we need to talk on the radio, we need to do other things. I'm sure everyone who wears masks has experienced the fact that even when it's not a little bit noisy in the background, it's difficult to communicate through a mask.
You can't see people's facial expressions. Yes.
And so we haven't even been wearing masks. We fly far more than most.
In the cockpit, you're
other
not wearing
people.
masks.
We're not wearing masks in the cockpit.
And you haven't gotten
specific about it. We are wearing them in airports and when we leave the cockpit and go to the back of the airplane. But the other thing that protects passengers is that since COVID is a respiratory disease, when you sit on an airplane, you're facing the back of another seat. You're breathing into the back of a seat. So that serves as a block. If you God forbid you sneeze.
I mean, you're already
of course,
wearing
you got
a
your
mask.
mask on, so
Yeah.
that's always a fun thought, sneezing into a mask and sitting there for the next 3 hours. Anyway, we won't go
But
into
no,
that.
it's a great point because you have been, and I can't underscore this enough for our podcast listeners. Here's a guy, he's a captain of a major passenger airline company. He's been flying all through COVID like he always has.
And I'm 62
past
years old, by the way.
He's 62 years old, which is not uncommon for pilots who are captains. You don't wear a mask in the cockpit for all the obvious reasons that you explain, and makes perfect sense to me. And yet you would be the ideal person to get COVID in a closed environment, yet because of precautions the airlines have taken, you haven't gotten COVID.
Well, the Hepa filters existed on the aircraft before COVID ever came along, thankfully, and they always help with things like the flu. People, I can understand.
Maybe they're replacing them more, though. Maybe they're replacing the filters.
Well, we're certainly keeping the air systems on longer.
Okay.
Even when we're on the ground, you're going to get that the HEPA filters are going to filter the air from start to finish. The mask on the airplane are an additional barrier. The seats are a barrier. The fact that we're not serving people like we used to, so that there's less of an interaction between the flight attendants, all of those things contribute to make air travel safe. From a viral
okay, so then it raises
standpoint.
the question: then why is it that we have filters in airplanes? Granted, they were already there with these with the HEPA filters. That's what I'm going to call them. That's what I've always called them. Some people say HEPA filters. I call HEPA filters, but why not have the same kind of filtering systems inside of buildings? So, for example, I have no doubt that you can buy these air filtering systems from, let's say Amazon or from any other website for that matter. I know they're expensive, by the way, they are. You don't retrofit your entire HVAC system, but in theory, but what you could do is buy them because they are standalone units and put them in the middle of the floor. And maybe there are some places that have already done that. What I'm talking about is workarounds so that we can keep businesses open. More specifically, like restaurants. As an example. I mean, what kind of data do you have about lockdowns in businesses as a general rule and how that's worked?
Well, when you look at businesses, you kind of have to look at the whole picture. When you look at lockdowns, you have to, number one, are they needed? Number two, do they work? And number three, we've never used lockdowns before in world history. We've had quarantines, but not lockdowns. And so we should say, should we do this again? We did it once already in the spring. First of all, when you look at these things, you're like, are they needed? Well, who's at risk from COVID? And right now, according to the ARP using CDC data, out of the 270,000 deaths in the United States, 106,000 were in nursing homes.
Wow.
That's 4 in 10 deaths from COVID occurred in nursing homes.
40% of deaths were in nursing homes throughout the United States.
Throughout the United
From COVID.
States. Now, let's think about this for a minute. These people are already sheltered in place. They're locked down. People in nursing homes don't go to bars. They don't go to restaurants. They're not out dancing in the street.
No, probably not.
They may go to church from on the weekend and all of that. I'm just saying that if the idea is that staying home is going to protect you from the COVID, these people are home. They were home and they're dying in home. The second thing, the elderly outside, the second group at risk, elderly outside nursing homes.
What is that? Oh, people that aren't in nursing homes,
right?
But are
older. 65 years of age and over.
So they live independently, in their own homes.
They're retired.
Still. Yeah,
they're not in a nursing home, but they're at 65 and they're over. They're the age of 65. 8 in 10 deaths in the United States. 8 in 10, 80% are people over the age of 65.
Wow.
That's retirement age. I think it's a fair age to use for retirement, right? Mm-hmm. Why does this matter? Because, again, these people aren't going to work every day. They live at home. They don't have to go out. They could have their groceries delivered. They can go to the store if they want to. I'm just saying that by and large, this is not a group of people who have to go to work anymore. They're retired. They can stay home if they choose to.
There's more flexibility.
Right.
Okay.
So 50% of the people who've died from COVID, people over the age of 50, that makes up 95% of the deaths over the age of 50. And then finally, under the age of 50 makes up only 5% of the deaths in the United States. Under age 30 is statistically insignificant. It doesn't even amount to 1% of the deaths, not even 1%. So, when I say it's statistically insignificant, obviously it's significant to the person's family, but we're talking about a policy for the entire nation, for the entire state, for your county, for your city. The question becomes, is the juice worth the squeeze? I mean, clearly the people who are most at risk are those who are already either sheltered in place in a nursing home, or essentially already not going out as much, people over the age of 65. So does it make sense to keep people under the age of 30 from working? Does it make sense to keep people under the age of 50 from working? It's not sustainable. Those people need to work to support families. They need to work to go to school.
So that makes perfect sense. So you basically have provided the statistics of whom is affected by the virus, of course. Certainly nursing homes have made up the lion's share of the deaths, but also folks who are over 65 that may even live independently or do live independently, have the right to lock down if they really want to, or probably taking precautions, but yet for whatever reason, when they do get COVID, have a larger likelihood of dying from it. So what you're saying is if you're 30 years of age or younger, why can't you go to a restaurant? As an example, and by the way, you're actually providing the data, so I want the podcast listeners to hear this. This is not a bunch of opinion stuff, right? It's actually data driven. Follow the science, like you hear all the blue mayors, the blue state mayors, and the state governors say. But we're actually providing the data of the fact that this whole one size fits all lockdown stuff, which we're about ready to re-enter, of course, throughout the United States, doesn't make sense, and we already figured that out. So go ahead.
Well, to the point that we've been making about who is most at risk from COVID, Dr. Jay Bhattacharya, who is a professor of medicine and economics at Stanford University, and is one of the 4 primary authors of the Great Barrington Declaration, makes the point that what we've been doing isn't working, and that we should be focused on protecting those who are most vulnerable and not protecting in the same fashion those who are not. From a spread standpoint, it would make a lot more sense for government to restrict access to nursing homes. And some have done it too late. Some governments have actually infected nursing homes by state governments by moving people who had COVID into the nursing homes. So, government essentially, they're looking at the wrong population. A one-size-fits-all approach to this problem is not only going to harm our economy and harm our children, it harms society and at the same time fails to achieve the mission. You'll hear people who are in favor of lockdown saying, we got to save lives. I'm saving lives. Well, whose life are they saving? They never can produce the life they save. They just say it over and over.
And that creates a scare tactic and lots of scare, of course, across the state. And it makes them sound virtuous, right? Because that's always what so many people like to say is I'm saving lives. And as you said, there's data on what lives we want to save, which are people in nursing homes, most importantly.
It's a bit like the rooster who takes credit for the sun coming up in the morning because he crows. You can't say they have nothing. There is no data that indicates they've saved lives from doing this at all. There's plenty of data that indicates Suicide is on the rise.
No doubt.
Drug use is on the rise. Unemployment is up. All of the societal issues that we should care about, if we care about our fellow man, are becoming more prevalent and dangerous. And on top of that, we're still not saving people. People in nursing homes are still dying despite lockdowns.
Even today, they're still dying.
Even today.
Despite the lockdown.
People over the age of 65. And look, you know, you can look at this. We've been wearing masks, social distancing, and you can modified lockdowns. There are very few places that ever went back to full capacity in the United States. And nonetheless, you know, we still have COVID, which shouldn't be a surprise. Because absent a vaccine or absence, which you can create herd immunity two ways, either by people who get it and you finally have the population's had it enough that you have herd immunity, or you can do it with a vaccine, or you can do it with some combination of both. But until that point, you're going to have people who are going to die from this disease.
So let's segue into schools, because this is a hugely important issue for so many parents, for so many, by the way, also for grandparents, many of whom watch children because their parents, of course, are trying to work and earn a living, and normally the kids would be at schools. That's why the grandparents are involved. And also, of course, we have a lot of issues with the teachers union. Before we go there, we're going to talk about a specific teacher. So get this, podcast listeners. A woman wokes out on anti-lockdown protesters. That's right. A woman wokes out on anti-lockdown protesters. So a Bend, Oregon teacher goes crazy as she's driving her car to school, right? Because she's a teacher. So she's in her car driving it, and she sees a bunch of anti-lockdown protesters. They're outside, they're protesting, right? Protesting is part of the First Amendment here in the United States. And they're saying, hey, we don't want lockdowns, which is, of course, what this very podcast is about. Nonetheless, and they're also not wearing masks when they're outside and they are protesting. So this particular teacher goes crazy. She winds her window down, stops her car, and goes crazy. We have this clip, and here it is.
I bet she has a hard time controlling her class, too.
Can you imagine? Right.
I hope she's just a substitute teacher.
No, she's a full-time teacher. So there you have it. So that is an Oregon teacher who just goes crazy and wokes out on the anti-lockdown protesters in Bend, Oregon. So you heard what she said, and Herb just said something really funny, which is I can't imagine what she says to her children. So get this. The article that came out, and this was on Fox News, it says, a teacher in Oregon was placed on administrative leave. That means she was suspended, by the way, administrative leave, on Monday after a viral video appeared to show her screaming and making an obscene gesture at a group of anti-lockdown protesters in downtown Bend, Oregon. The video was recorded on Sunday and has been viewed more than 3 million times. The woman was identified in reports as a first-year teacher in the Jefferson County School District. At one point, she told the downtown Bend protesters to kill themselves. That's a teacher, by the way. And she also used the profanity, blank you. I am a teacher. I teach students. My students' families are dying. She was heard screaming as some of the surrounding protesters chanted USA. So we are aware of the incident and are investigating. Jefferson County School Superintendent Ken Parshall told Bend's WTVZ. Parshall declined to name the teacher or the state which the school she worked out. They wouldn't even tell us who the teacher is, right? Which I think is ridiculous because as a parent, I'd certainly want to know who that teacher is who talks that way to people. He said the teacher is on paid leave. Of course she gets paid. while she's on leave, pending the outcome of an investigation. What's there to investigate? It's on video. I mean, what do you have to, it's like you see people who are protesting.
They provoked her.
They're exercising their First Amendment right, and she decides to stop. She stays in her car, mind you, but stops her car, winds down the window, and then just goes crazy, nuclear. So apparently, Oregon is one of only a handful of states that have required at least a partial closure of schools as long as COVID infections remain above certain levels. So here's what I think happened here. I think she's really ticked off she actually had to go to work. It's like, I don't want to work. The teachers union isn't doing a good enough job. What are your thoughts on this, Herb?
Well, I mean, look, like I said, I bet she has a hard time controlling her class because she certainly has a hard time controlling her own temper.
So what about school?
One of the things that, to me, it's like, look, I hope if she teaches history, she should know, or social studies, that in America, everyone has a right to protest. It's one of the rights the Constitution protects. And look, there are plenty of people who over the course of the summer destroyed historical statues and
lost their minds. People are losing their minds.
But I guess my point is that, others didn't lose their heads when that happened and scream at them. We responded in a more calm, intelligent manner that we would like our children to respond with. So, I think that obviously she should set an example. Teachers do set examples. They lead by example. And it's important for her to recognize that while she's entitled to her opinion, other people should be allowed to express theirs, especially when they're doing it in an orderly, respectful manner. And the last time I checked,
she didn't do.
chanting USA over and over again is not something that should send her into a fit.
Perfect. And that's Woman Wokes Out on anti-lockdown protesters. So what about going back to school and the lockdowns?
Well, I think one of the symptoms of this whole last 9 months since March, people stop looking at what other places are doing. The media doesn't report it. For a while, for example, people were saying, look at Sweden, it's horrible. They're not wearing masks, they're not locking down, they didn't close their schools. You just watch their death rate go up, watch it skyrocket. Right now, Sweden's death rate is lower per 100,000, so that we're comparing apples to apples. It's lower than 30 of the states in the United States. And they never shut down, they never locked down.
This is their overall death rate?
Their overall death rate,
okay.
70 people for every 100,000. Keep in mind that they have a significant portion of their population over the age of 92. They have one of the oldest populations, far older population than the United States.
Great longevity in Sweden.
Right. So, basically...
Yet they have one of the smallest death rates from COVID.
I wouldn't say it's in Europe. It's not the smallest. They're the seven.
Talk about Sweden.
Sweden. They're like eighth from the top in Europe,
all right.
But they're doing better than 30 of the 50 states.
And they've had no lockdowns.
And they've had no lockdowns. Their grade school children never stopped going to school. High school and college they suspended for about 2 months and then resumed it. They don't require masks. They do practice social distancing. So you have to say, and then you look at France, for instance. In September, they started back to school. And even when COVID deaths started to increase in France, and cases started to increase, and the infection rate went up in France, they never stopped going to school. No school children died. No teachers died. So, you look at parts of the United States. In Tennessee, in Knox County, children went back to school. They played sports. They're still going to school. They're still playing sports. And I'm not talking about going to Zoom class and then popping in 2 times a week. I'm talking about going to school. They wear masks. They social distance. But they've basically continued to live normally. And, look at Tennessee's death rate. Compare it to all these other states. And Tennessee has large metropolitan areas.
So let's talk about Tennessee.
Memphis.
Yeah, so what has happened in Tennessee? Because you're from Tennessee originally.
Right. Well, I mean, like I said, their death rate's as low or lower than most of the states in the United States.
And yet that's because, and even though Tennessee is kept open.
Even though they've kept largely open, they did restrict people coming into restaurants and so forth. But
Okay.
we're talking about schools right now.
Schools, okay.
So, from my standpoint, I don't think lockdowns work for the most part. But if you're going to if you're going to do some type of, if you got to choose between businesses and schools, I'll take sending the kids to school every time, because I think it's important. I think from a socialization standpoint, it has to happen. And from a reality standpoint, for parents to go back to work in many cases, it has to happen as well. But we've had an opportunity, even in Maryland. Maryland wouldn't let kids go, most of the counties in Maryland, the bigger counties, didn't let kids go back to school. But the private schools open. We're talking about public schools versus private schools. No deaths in the private schools. Teachers or students. No long-term hospitalizations or anything of that nature. So Europe's been doing it successfully. No deaths. Parts of the United States have been doing it, predominantly in the South.
Okay.
And yet you still have places where they're digging their heels in. New York's infection rate was barely 3%, and they were talking about closing their schools again. So, what are we doing here? The data clearly show that it is safe to go back to school in a COVID environment. Kids are wearing masks, they're socially distancing, they're playing sports. It's safe to do it, but most parts of the United States are not doing it.
That's exactly right. What I think is interesting, too, is there was a recent article that came out about Bristol, Tennessee, and you're from Tennessee.
Right.
And Bristol, Tennessee is a town where the main street separates, on the one side, Bristol, Virginia, and on the other side, Bristol, Tennessee.
Right.
It's a town with the same name, but it's actually in
Half
two
in
different
one
states.
state, half in the other.
But if you were to look at the town and you were to drive down the main street in the middle of the town, you're like, oh, well, this is Bristol. You wouldn't think that you're in potentially two different states, depending on what side of the road you're from. And interestingly enough, Governor Ralph Northam of Virginia wants to do massive shutdowns. He's really an anti-lockdowns. He's a pediatrician by trade, and he's the governor of Virginia. And so it would be interesting to see where you have this main street, and on one side of the street you have a town that's effectively all the businesses are closed and the schools are closed, but yet on the other side of the town, the businesses are open and the schools are open. And it just shows you how, if there were ever an example of stupidity, right, in demonstrating this, because what are you going to do? You're going to walk across the other side of the town if you want to go get carry out, if you want to go into a restaurant or a bar, or you just want to go to a department store or what have you. Although I'm sure in both states, Walmart is open because you can't get COVID in Walmart. Thoughts on this about the schools? Other thoughts?
Well, you have the school component, and then after schools, I guess some would say you have the church component. And
churches. Yeah, let's talk about churches.
That's that's really been a sticky wicket for some of those who want to do lockdowns, because I think the Supreme Court is starting to. Governor Cuomo, whenever they put restrictions on church services, I think they pushed back, and he basically the case went to the Supreme Court. They overruled him, and then he just withdrew the restrictions. He kind of like, well, yeah, I know I'm going to lose, so I'm pulling back the restriction. But, the Supreme Court has had an interesting take on it. Honestly, if you social distance and you wear a mask, my thought is you should be able to go to church. What's the difference? Some might suggest that, well, you sing, and when you sing, you're going to produce, your respiration is going to be higher, et cetera. But if you're 6 feet away from somebody, that shouldn't make that much difference.
And by the way,
particularly if you're wearing a mask.
Why can't a reverend or a priest or whatever religion you are, why can't they have more services, right? Instead of having, let's say, a single service on Sunday, why not have 3 services on Sunday and say, okay, we can only have X amount of people per service, so it's more work for the church to have all these services, but you are more socially distanced throughout the day in those services. But instead, the government is just saying, oh no, you got to shut down. And I know we've talked about this ad nauseum on this podcast about the whole Lowe's and Walmart and Home Depot stuff, but it is really remarkable, and it's also really kind of weird that they would focus on the church and say, you've got to be, just completely and utterly closed. But the state interests, the interests that the state has, financial interest in things like casinos, well, they can be 25% open.
Right.
And we're seeing that more and more across the U.S. And it just blows me away that so many of my friends and your friends too, who are on the other side of the aisle, don't see how stupid that looks.
Right. Well, I'm trying to remember the exact quote. I think it was Justice Gorsuch who said that Caesar's palace does not trump a church. You know, and of course Caesar's palace is a casino.
Of course.
And the casino was allowed to stay open, and the churches had different rules. I think these types of inequities, to people with an open mind, they look at it and they shake their heads and they're like, well, you know, we all know that government regulations can sometimes be crazy, but these particularly don't make a lot of sense.
Well, the other thing too, I think is interesting is that, and a lot of podcast listeners don't know this, is states have a huge stake in these casinos remaining open because unlike the typical tax that you would pay in a state when you buy something, you know, like a sales tax or so forth, and the state gets that sales tax revenue, at casinos, the tax rates are considerably higher. They could be well into the, you know, teens, 10, 15, 20% easily. So the state has an enormous amount of interest in making sure those facilities stay open. A lot of people don't realize that. They just figure, oh, well, you know, the casinos, it's just a casino. You go there to have fun. They don't realize the state is as much of an owner of that casino as anyone else is. And I just find it interesting that the left doesn't understand that. So, but before we go on, we have a clip. You can't believe this. So get this, podcast listeners. A Michigan politician threatens Trump supporters. That's right, a Michigan politician threatens Trump supporters. So I have to set this up, okay? So Michigan State Representative Cynthia Johnson, she's in the House of Representatives, as they call it, of Michigan. So it's the lower body in Michigan. She represents the Detroit area in Michigan. And they had hearings in Michigan about what? About, of course, the election and inconsistencies in the election in Michigan, just to say the least. So they have hearings, and Rudy Giuliani is there, and he's testifying, and she apparently just wreaked havoc in these hearings, and apparently she loves to get attention. So she decided to, instead of being interested in the very least of learning about problems with the election in Michigan, she instead tried to say everything she could about Rudy Giuliani and others testifying that they were lying and so forth. I mean, basically completely out of control. Then, after that issue, you know, those hearings and so forth, she decided to check her phone and found a lot of threats, which, by the way, the threats were real and they were wrong against her, and they were racist threats. But that happened after, of course, and it was wrong no matter what, but it happened after her original attacks on Rudy Giuliani and others, and wreaking havoc on the committee hearings. So she decided, of course, to come out with the following clip. Threatening Trump supporters. We have that clip, and here it is.
So this is just a warning to you Trumpers. Be careful. Walk lightly. We ain't playing with you. Enough of the shenanigans. Enough is enough. And for those of you who are soldiers, you know how to do it. Do it right. Be in order. Make them pay. I love y'all. Bye-bye.
Yeah, she wants to send her soldiers from the left to go kill the Trump supporters. That's what I was hearing. But she loves you. She loves you.
Yeah. You know, the first thing that I thought of when she said she wanted to put people under oath, right? That was her objection.
That was her main issue.
Her main issue was that they weren't put under oath before they testified. Well, Mark, as you and I both know, in state houses across the country, you don't put people under oath.
You don't have that. You don't have that right. Yeah.
No, you don't do that. It's not done. And by the way, if taking an oath guaranteed that a person would tell the truth, then Bill Clinton would not have been disbarred after he left the presidency from Arkansas, because Bill Clinton was disbarred for lying under oath when he was president of the United States about having sex with Monica Lewinsky.
Exactly.
So if an oath was a guarantee that someone would tell the truth, you wouldn't have perjury either. So, look, my thought is very simple on this. I don't think anyone in the United States who has a political point of view, whether they be for Joe Biden or Donald Trump, should have to tread lightly. I don't think anyone should have to worry about a soldier coming to get them. Love y'all. Bye.
So here's...
That's perhaps a more loving and more appropriate message. You can't, everyone talks about division and wanting to heal in one country.
And then they go do that.
Got to stop this bickering.
I agree.
This.
See, and that's kind of why we're doing this particular segment in this podcast. So we have CNN to
and
prove
that goes
this.
for people, and that goes for people too who don't like President-elect Biden. That's just the way it is.
I agree. So to prove your point, we have CNN's Aaron Burnett talking about the threats that were received by this Michigan House member, Cynthia Johnson. So we have that clip. It's important. It's important to listen to these as well because this is part of the whole story. And here it is.
New tonight, President Trump's made-up election fraud allegations now sparking death threats. Here are voicemails that Michigan State Representative Cynthia Johnson received. And beware, they're disturbing.
I hope you like burning crosses in your front yard, because I'm sure by the time this is all said and done, there will be several. I hope you are dead by now. You are a piece of shit. You need to be run out of office and hung from a tree, you dumb.
You're done. You're so done. Should be swinging from a rope, you Democrats.
That's awful. And one of the words bleeped from these lynching death threats is the N-word.
Yeah, so it's clearly awful, and it's important that we include that clip in this podcast so that people can hear the entire story and the context in which Cynthia Johnson decided to go crazy, except that you also need to know that Cynthia Johnson herself then said she was going to send out her troops to, basically get rid of the Trump supporters. It sounded to me like those were death threats. So, and I agree with Herb is that this is the problem with politics today. Because first of all, we have a media that is completely and utterly silent, and our media is dead, right? You just heard Aaron Burnett say that the election fraud issues were completely and utterly made up. That is an anchor of a major TV news station saying that, right? It's not her job to determine that. It's her job to tell you what has happened and what people are saying. But she's clearly all in for one side, and it's creating more and more division, and yet CNN doesn't get it. And we want to give you the third clip. And here's CNN's Aaron Burnett, once again, Aaron Burnett, talking about the hearings in Michigan concerning election fraud. And in this particular clip, you're going to hear how all this started, which is Cynthia Johnson, who's literally wreaking havoc on the hearings, investigating election fraud. We have that clip, and here it is.
This stuff is vile. It's deeply upsetting. Why is Representative Johnson being threatened with lynching with her political party part of the threat? Well, in part because she was part of this, the Michigan House oversight hearing last week, where Rudy Giuliani and witnesses pushed President Trump's baseless election fraud claims, and the representative objected to it.
You have a point of order.
Yes.
What is your point of order?
Point of order is to have them under oath.
You're out of order. As I've said, this is something that is not done here in this state. It's really only...
it may not be done under the state,
This
but
is
you're
not a
allowing
court.
people to come in here and lie, and I know they're lying.
Representative, you're out of order. I've indulged you, but you're out of order.
And of course, those things were lies. Rudy Giuliani knew they were lies.
So that's CNN all in on taking one side. So look, once again, if you're an elected official and you're Cynthia Johnson, what you should be saying in the hearing is, so I have a question. You should ask the chairman of the committee, hey, look, I have a question for Rudy Giuliani. And my question is, what specific information can you show me to demonstrate and support that it's actually evidence-based that things happened in the election that created and could have overturned the election, number one, but also involved election fraud issues, right? That's what should have happened. That's what should have happened. But no, she didn't. She just went like, that's the way the entire hearing went. Thoughts on that?
Well, we've kind of already alluded to it. I mean, that's just not common practice in any legislature to put somebody under oath when they.
We don't do it
when they
anyway.
testify.
Legislatures don't do that.
Yeah. So, and as we've already pointed out, someone under oath still can lie, just like President Clinton did. And so.
But my understanding is they signed affidavits anyway, saying that what they were
They
saying
did.
was true.
They were sworn affidavits,
But that was for the court, and then they went in front of the political body where you don't sign affidavits and you gave your testimony, but that's the same testimony that could be used against you in court if you're lying and you get in big trouble for it.
Exactly. But look, you and I have served in the legislature long enough, over probably almost 25 years between us, to know that there are plenty of legislators who never miss an opportunity to grandstand and get emotional and leave out facts, because it's what they do. They want to, they bring more heat than light to a discussion, I guess is the best way to put it. And the best way when you have somebody testifying before you to get to the bottom of something is to ask a good question. And she just basically didn't take advantage of the privilege that the voters had given her.
Exactly. And anyway, that is Michigan politician threatens Trump supporters. So next up, we're going to talk about government itself, how government is locking itself down. Namely that, government employees aren't going to work, they're working remotely, at least we hope they are. And that government legislatures, state legislatures, what are they going to do? And how would you, if a bill was put into a legislature and the legislature was in session and the legislature is locked down and having limited interaction with people and with elected officials, how does someone effectively get their point across if they are opposing a piece of legislation? How do they lobby people who are in the legislature to try to stop legislation? And I think this is interesting. It's an interesting part of this whole lefty lockdown discussion that we're having with Herb McMillan, namely that I don't think it's fair if you're going to try to pass massive pieces of legislation or any piece of legislation for that matter, that the public can't be present at a hearing, because I'm being told that in many states the hearings are going to be remote.
Well, you've hit on a pretty key component of this lockdown. This is the one that I have one of the greatest difficulties with. From the state to the county to city government, legislatures, county councils, and city councils are meeting remotely. What a nice thing not to ever have to have people come in and tell you they think that what you're doing is wrong. Basically, you're taking away their ability to have a public hearing and forcing them to demonstrate, just to get any kind of attention whatsoever. At a time when governors and county executives and mayors have basically dictatorial powers. They say that the power to tax is the power to destroy. The power to shut down a business trumps the power to tax every day. The difference is only a legislature can raise a tax, and then an executive has to approve it. Not so with shutting down these businesses. We've been going through this for 9 months. Listen, if you can go to church, if you can go to a hardware store, why is it that a government and merchants can come up with ways to keep those places safe so that people can testify? If merchants can figure out a way to keep a place of business safe, then a state, county, and city government ought to be able to figure that out as well. Whether it means, for example, I live in the city of Annapolis. The city council could easily meet in one of the bigger buildings at the State House, easily. You could easily social distance people. They're not even trying to do that. They don't want to do it. They don't want to come back, and they don't want to face the heat from people. And that's their job. And that's the only forum that some people would have to speak to the governor or the county executive, to go to a county council meeting so that they can speak to the...
In person.
And they'll say, well, we're doing it on Zoom. You know what? That's not the same. It's not the same as being there in person. It's not the same as having others supporting you when you do it.
Here's proof. Here's proof of that, Herb. Here's proof. And this is really important for podcast listeners. If you think for 1 minute, podcast listeners, that it's okay for a state legislature or any government to meet remotely via Zoom and then try to pass bills and have bill hearings remotely via Zoom, if you think that's okay, then hear this. There are some states that are looking at raising taxes to make up the difference of all of the revenue that they lost by shutting down the businesses. Now think about this. They shut down the businesses, the state did. Businesses are literally closing left and right permanently. And then the state says, well, we're going to meet remotely and we're going to try to raise taxes. In fact, we are going to raise taxes and we're going to only allow you to testify remotely via Zoom. I mean, literally, you have no effectiveness to be able to testify that way. Yes, you can testify that way, but is it really effective? It's a lot different when you have all of the elected officials in one hearing room and you as a voter and a concerned parent go in there and you start testifying in person and looking them right in the eye and holding them accountable. And if that weren't bad enough, we even have states that are now saying, hey, that way we voted, that was a complete disaster, the whole voting, via mail with no voter ID and no proof of who you really are. We're going to make that permanent now. And we're going to make it a bill in the legislature to pass because, hey, it worked good for us because, the Democrats, it worked great for us, really hurt, truth in voting and integrity in voting, but we don't really care. And we're going to make sure that you really can't testify in person because of COVID. We're going to have all of these restrictions on the legislature. This is literally happening real time now, podcast listeners. So I want you to expand upon that because this is right down your alley.
Well, again, if an elected official can find time and make a way to have a fundraising event, and they have in places where people come, they should be able to figure out a way to get those same people into a room to testify.
That's a great point.
If you're able to raise money,
great point.
You should be able to also listen to constituents who don't agree with you. It's a big problem. It's going to get worse. Again, these county executives, governors, mayors, they've got dictatorial powers, and they don't have to have the peasants. The peasants don't get to come in. And, some people don't have the technological capability to do the Zoom thing.
Absolutely.
They're not into that. But they still should have the right to come in and testify. And government, why can't government be as flexible as businesses have been? Government makes businesses bend over backwards with rules, et cetera, and so forth, so that they can have customers. Well, we're the government's customer. What are they doing to make it so that we can come in and ask for a return on our investment, so to speak? That needs to be done. It hasn't been done, and people blow it off. It shouldn't be blown off. It's important. We've looked at these four things: businesses, churches, schools, and government. We ask who is at risk with respect to lockdowns.
Yeah.
We've concluded we know who's at risk. So we have to ask the question, we've done this once, did it work? And the answer is no, it did not work. When we first did the lockdown in the spring, we were told that this was so that we could crush the curve, have rooms in the hospitals. Most of the hospitals were empty. They never filled up, with the exception of New York State. New York State had it worse. They never did overflow in New York State. They never needed to use the Mercy. They never needed to really use the tents or anything of that nature. And so now some would suggest, we need to do this again, because now we have people going to the hospitals and hospitals are at capacity. You'll hear it all the time. But isn't it funny? They'll tell you how many people are in the emergency, ER. They'll tell you how many people are in acute care and how many people are in ICU.
Sure.
But they never tell you how many beds there are in the state or the county or the city. And they never break it down for you. They need to have a little transparency here in this regard. And I was looking at the data, and, they're going to say, well, we were afraid they're going to be full. Hospitals are designed to be full. That's how they make money. And believe me, they lost a lot of money and laid off a lot of people in the spring because they weren't full. But to the point of we need to do this so that the hospitals won't be overwhelmed. If you look at a Time magazine, January 18th issue, they did a story about the flu. And if you read the story and didn't know it was about the flu, it would be saying everything they're saying right now. There are tents set up outside hospitals. And actually, in this article, it mentions how a mom lost a 10-year-old son or child to the flu. A lot more. If you just go back and read that article, New Jersey is concerned. It's happening in Alabama. This pretty much happens every year. It happens a lot during flu season. Hospitals are overwhelmed. And one other thing I want to talk to, I was talking about transparency. I asked our county executive for how many beds we had available in Anne Arundel County. He never gave it to me. I finally, being in the legislature, I figured out a way to get the information. But you just don't have the whole picture till you see it. We're still not at capacity in my county, and we're not at capacity in the rest of the United States.
You'd never know it, though, by the way
you would never know it. They just say we're worried about getting there. And
that's happening across the country.
The projections, and we all know about the projections. The projection that said even if we social distance and wear masks, 3 million people were going to be dead by September. Those kind of projections. And on top of that, Health and Human Services has changed now. They keep changing the data. What do I mean by that? Well, on October 6th, the Department of Health and Human Services said that if you were admitted for observation, even if it was for less than 6 hours, that's a hospital admission. So in other words, if you go to the hospital, they keep you for 6 hours and say, you can go home, you're fine. You're tallied as a hospital admission due to COVID.
Wow.
And that's a major change. Now, are they breaking out when they say that this many people are in acute care for a day? Are they telling you how many were there just for observation and then went home? No, they're not.
But why? See, I think that our podcast listeners are probably thinking, okay, why? Why would government be lying to us this way? Why would they be lying to us in this way and not giving us all the information?
Well, it's easier to lead sheep if they don't know where they're going. I mean, they just follow you. And, from my standpoint, I do think that in a lot of ways, the lockdowns did not work in the spring. They didn't. COVID went down, right, but that was because it was summertime and people were outside and they weren't in enclosed spaces. So they're just basically doubling down on a bad bet. People have been wearing masks and socially distancing, following all the rules. We've had reduced services at restaurants and bars and everywhere, all across the country. And it seems funny to me that politicians wag their fingers in people's face and say, it's your fault. It's not my fault. It's your fault because you're not doing what I tell you. But I travel the United States. I've gone all over, coast to coast, north to south. People are wearing their masks in restaurants. I've not seen one instance where a person wasn't when they were supposed to. Not one. It's funny.
And yet the virus continues to spread because it's a virus.
It's a virus. The virus is a virus.
Yes.
And it is going to spread. And what we should be doing are things that work. Why isn't our focus on these nursing homes? Why isn't our focus on people over the age of 65? Why are we treating people under the age of 50 the same way that we would treat an 85-year-old?
That is really the key question.
That is the key question.
And that is the key question that the media fails to ask any governor or any mayor or any county executive. Because if they did, how would you respond? Of course, they would respond, I'm just trying to keep everybody safe. No, you're not.
Well, it's like a parent. We love all of our children, but we don't treat them all equally. Because you don't treat a 21-year-old the same as you treat a 5-year-old.
Right.
You don't. You love them, and that's why you do treat them differently. I mean, look, it would actually make more sense to card people at bars to see if they're over the age of 21 and under the age of 65 than what we're doing. If you want to get the most bang for your buck. We know that from
Don't let anyone over 65 into a bar, is that what you're saying?
Thankfully, I'm 62. But the point is let's focus on the demographic. Focus on those who are at risk. And honestly, no, I really wouldn't do that. But it would make a lot more sense than what they're doing. And guess what? It would be based on the data and the science. Because, a 30-year-old is just not at risk, particularly one with no pre-existing conditions. And to make the entire community of 30-year-olds and under suffer because of it is foolish, particularly as it relates to going to school. It's that simple.
So next up, podcast listeners, we got Go Woke or Go Broke. It's Go Woke or Go Broke, and it is Goya names AOC Employee of the Month. Goya names AOC Employee of the Month. So Goya is a food company, right? It's a food company that they produce food and prepared foods and so forth, primarily for the Latino community, no doubt. And the Goya CEO has named AOC Employee of the Month. So it says Latino food company Goya has awarded Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez its Employee of the Month award after AOC started a boycott campaign against Goya. Instead of her boycott leading to Goya going broke, the company has had a 1,000% increase in the Trump-supporting company sales. Well, yeah, so that's why, right? Because the CEO of Goya Food, Bob Uwananwe, went to the White House and said he supports Donald Trump because Donald Trump is pro-business and trying to make it easier for businesses to operate because of the intense regulatory burden that Obama put on the business community. Everybody knows it, and everybody knows what I just said there is true. Well, Bob Uwananwe went to the White House and basically praised the President of the United States. And Bob Uwananwe also happens to be Hispanic, and he also is a religious person. Oh, so you can't be that and support Donald Trump. We have a clip on when Bob Uwananwe, the CEO of Goya, was at the White House, and here it is.
A big backlash today, a campaign to boycott Goya Foods after their CEO praised the president.
We're all truly blessed at the same time to have a leader like President Trump, who is a builder. And that's what my grandfather did. He came to this country to build, to grow, to prosper. And so we have an incredible builder, and we pray. We pray for our leadership, our president, and we pray for our country that we will continue to prosper and to grow.
And as a result of that, AOC said, she tweeted out, boycott Goya Foods. Of course, she's trying to cancel Goya Foods. Classic cancel culture, right? I don't like the person that likes Donald Trump, so therefore I'm going to try to cancel everything that they're part of and everything that they're doing. And of course, CNN jumped on the bandwagon as well, because CNN commentator Ana Navarro started talking about Goya Foods on CNN and how they should be boycotted. And we have that clip, and here it is.
You also have got to believe that his consumers have the same exact right. So do not expect a community that feels victimized by Donald Trump and attacked by Donald Trump constantly, and that is your loyal consumer base, not to react and feel hurt when they see you praising that person. Actions have consequences. He's free to take those actions. Those actions have consequences.
Sure. So Ana Navarro, a commentator on CNN, says that the Latino community is being victimized by Donald Trump. What a bunch of nonsense, because we all know that in the election that we just had, we have entire precincts in the state of Texas, which are Hispanic, primarily of Mexican descent, and they voted overwhelmingly for Donald Trump, and also the Cuban community in South Florida. But that's not enough, because in Texas, Democrat and former presidential candidate Julian Castro criticized Goya for participating with Trump at the White House. We have that clip, and here it is.
Texas Democrat and former presidential candidate Julian Castro. He encouraged Latinos to boycott the brand, tweeting the hashtag GoyaWay. In a statement, Uwananwe defended his remarks and called for the country to come together.
So GoyaWay was the hashtag that was trending through Twitter at the time, and Julian Castro, he decided to start that. Why? Because all of these members of the left, who also happen to be Hispanic, are terrified that Hispanics might start trending Republican and voting Republican. It's really that simple. So the only way they can stop it is not from the power of their ideas and of their intellect. They have to stop it by canceling companies that support people who happen to support business.
Well, I guess the money's going your way now, Mr. President of Goya Foods. I mean, because I think that their increase in sales was about what, 1,000%?
1,000% over this period of time.
That's a lot.
It's huge. And get this, Ivanka Trump, she tweeted, if it's Goya, it's got to be good. And there's a picture of her, and hopefully Chris can put that up here. It's a picture of her tweet, and it's Ivanka Trump, of course, and she is, posing with, a Goya product like this. It's like, Vanna White. Vanna White.
Oh, yeah.
It's like, oh my gosh. A lot of the podcast listeners will know who that is. Maybe not the millennials. We're not really sure. But nonetheless, their sales increased 1,000%. And we have that clip from Fox Business News talking about that very fact. And here is the clip.
But God knows she's earned it. AOC named Employee of the Month earlier this year after she supported the boycott on Goya because CEO Bob Unanue praised President Trump after a roundtable at the White House with Hispanic leaders. Oh my gosh, how could he? But the boycott backfired and led to a counter-movement supporting Goya that saw sales increase by 1,000%.
And this is what has to happen in the United States, right? You cancel culture by basically buying the stuff of the people they're trying to cancel to show them, you know what, we're not going to put up with this. We're just not going to. Yeah, I mean, it's just, you get to have an opinion, and that is your opinion. But the fact that you want to destroy someone, and by the way, if you destroyed Goya, imagine the thousands of jobs that you would destroy too, including people who are Hispanic working for the company.
You know, it just, people got to get away from this. I mean, look, I was not a fan of Joe Biden, but if somebody goes to the White House and praises him, and they're a business person, I might disagree with them. I might say why I disagree with them. But I don't think I'm going to tell people not to use their product anymore. There are plenty of people in business in Maryland, my state. Some of them will support a Republican. Some of them support a Democrat. They're in business. So what?
Right.
Who cares?
Right. And I don't go on their door and have it like a mark on their door, kind of like, the Nazis, during Kristallnacht, and say, oh, no, you don't go to those Jewish stores because, those people are evil. I mean, literally, this is the left losing their mind and saying we must destroy people's lives because they have a different opinion. It's incredible.
Yeah, it's destroying the village in order to save it is counterproductive.
It sure is. And by the way, that is precisely why, Herb.
And this is our village,
Yes, it is. That's why we're doing Go Woke or Go Broke segments on this podcast. And that is Go Woke or Go Broke. Goya names AOC Employee of the Month. So, Herb McMillan, final thoughts on the Lefty Lockdowns conversation that we've had. These are your final thoughts.
A lot of times people focus on the business aspect of that. Obviously, the unemployment rate's gone up. A lot of people have lost their jobs. When you look just at businesses. In New York, 27.8% of small businesses have closed.
Permanently.
New Jersey, permanently. 31. So helping them won't help because they're gone.
They're gone.
They're gone. You can't help something that's gone. And even in places like Texas and California, 32%, 31%, gone. You can't help something that is gone. But looking beyond the business aspects of it, which filter down to people, of course, Dr. Bhattacharya, author of the Great Barrington Declaration, who believes that we should have focused protection and live life normally if we're not in an at-risk group, points out that the UN estimates this year that 130 million people will starve to death across the world due to lockdowns.
Oh, my word.
Starve to death.
Oh,
That's
my
a
word.
UN number. It's not my number. It's the United Nations
Why
estimate.
isn't this being reported on the major networks? I mean, all of them. MSNBC, CNN, ABC, CBS, Fox, all of them.
The CDC estimates, he mentions, that 1 in 4 adults between the ages of 18 and 24 say that they have considered suicide this year.
Wow.
1 in 4. 25% of the population between 18 and 24 have considered suicide. Cancer deaths, diabetes, normal immunizations, those are things that we're going to feel in the future because of these lockdowns. So from a humanitarian point of view, and not just an economic one, lockdowns don't work. They're harmful. We know they're harmful. They've been harmful before, and they're not going to work. They didn't work last time. They aren't going to work this time.
And that's it. That's the final word for Mark and the Millennials. And that's it for Mark and the Millennials. I want to thank you for joining us. This is Mark Fisher. Special thanks to Herb McMillan, our guest today. Also, thank you to Christopher Hopkins, our assistant producer and our millennial. Check us out on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Parler, Rumble, and our website. See you next time.